Nothing says happy marriage like being uninvited to Christmas by your wife so she can catch up with her ex-boyfriend. That's exactly what Mira told me on December 20th, standing in our kitchen like she was announcing the weather forecast. "Don't come for Christmas. My ex will be there and I want to talk to him," she said, not even looking up from her phone. Just like that. 22 years of marriage reduced to a casual dismissal while she scrolled through whatever garbage filled her social media feed. I'm Porter Kellor, and I manage Wallace Hardware on 5th Street. I fix things for a living: broken pipes, faulty wiring, squeaky hinges. But apparently, I can't fix a broken marriage when my wife decides she'd rather spend the holidays reminiscing with Morrison, her college boyfriend who waltzed back into town 3 months ago like some discount romantic comedy hero. The expensive watch I'd bought her was sitting in my truck, wrapped in silver paper with a red bow. $2,000 for a Cartier timepiece she'd been eyeing at the jewelry store downtown. I'd been planning to surprise her Christmas morning, maybe rekindle some of that spark we'd lost somewhere between mortgage payments and her endless complaints about my lack of ambition. "You want to talk to him," I repeated, setting down my coffee mug with deliberate care. "About what exactly?" Mira finally looked up, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite it being 7 in the morning. She'd been getting up earlier lately, spending more time on her appearance. Should have been a red flag, but I'd been too busy trying to keep our hardware store profitable to notice the warning signs. "Old times. We have history, Porter. You wouldn't understand." History. Right. Like our 22 years together was just some footnote compared to whatever teenage romance she'd shared with Ty before he moved to California to become some hotshot business consultant. "I understand plenty," I said. "I understand you're choosing him over me for Christmas." She shrugged, already turning back to her phone. "It's just one day. You can go to your sister Casey's house. She always invites you." Just one day. Christmas, the holiday we'd spent together every year since we got married. The day I'd proposed to her, actually, 23 years ago when we were both young and stupid and thought love conquered everything. I walked outside to my truck and sat there for a minute, staring at that silver-wrapped box. The winter air bit at my face, but I barely felt it. My breath came out in white puffs while I processed what had just happened. Mira worked in human resources at Brennan Insurance Company. She'd been staying late more often recently, claiming year-end evaluations were keeping her busy. She'd also been taking more girls' nights with her friend Lisa Hartwell, who worked in the same office and had the moral compass of a broken shopping cart. I'd heard Lisa on the phone with Mira last week, something about, "You deserve better," and "Porter's such a small-town guy." They'd gone quiet when I walked into the room, but the damage was done. I knew they'd been talking about me, probably planning this whole thing. The smart move would have been to drive to the jewelry store and return the watch, get my money back, accept that my marriage was over, and start planning my next move. But sitting there in my truck, watching my breath fog up the windshield, a different idea started forming. I thought about Ty Morrison, Mr. Perfect with his expensive suits, and his stories about client meetings in San Francisco. I thought about Mira's parents, Harold and June Brennan, who'd never thought I was good enough for their daughter. I thought about all the family gatherings where I'd been treated like the help, where Mira would apologize for my simple job and my limited education. Most of all, I thought about the look on Mira's face when she told me not to come to Christmas. Not apologetic, not sad, just indifferent. Like I was an inconvenience she was finally dealing with. I started the truck and drove to Brennan Jewelers. "Returning this," I told the clerk, a young woman named Amanda who'd helped me pick out the watch 2 weeks earlier. "Was there a problem with it?" she asked, clearly confused. "Yeah, the woman I bought it for turned out to be someone I don't know." Amanda processed the return without asking more questions. Maybe she could tell from my expression that this wasn't the time for small talk. She handed me the receipt and asked if I needed anything else. "Actually, yes. Do you have any empty gift boxes? Something about the same size as the watch box? She disappeared into the back room and returned with a plain white jewelry box. Will this work? Perfect. I drove home and parked in the garage. Mira had already left for work, probably to plan more old times conversations with Ty. The house felt different somehow, like I was seeing it through new eyes. All the furniture we'd picked out together, the photos on the walls, the little decorative touches that had made this place feel like home. Now, it just felt like a museum of a relationship that had been over longer than either of us had admitted. I went to my home office and fired up the computer. Divorce papers. I'd never looked up how to file for divorce, but the internet made everything easy these days. The state of Pennsylvania had all the forms available online. No-fault divorce, irreconcilable differences. I could file the papers myself, no lawyer required for the initial paperwork. It took me 3 hours to fill out everything correctly. Petition for divorce, property settlement agreements, financial statements. I printed multiple copies of everything, signed each page with careful precision, and made sure every date was filled in correctly. The filing fee was $300. I could submit everything electronically and have the papers served to Mira within a week. But that wasn't dramatic enough for what she'd put me through. I took the divorce papers and placed them carefully in the white jewelry box with the filing receipt on top. Then I wrapped the box in the same silver paper I'd used for the watch, complete with the red bow. The next morning, I called Mira's parents. Harold, it's Porter. I wanted to let you know I won't be making it to Christmas dinner tomorrow. Oh? Harold's voice carried that familiar tone of barely concealed disapproval. Is everything all right? Everything's fine. Just have some things to take care of. I did drop off Mira's Christmas present, though. It's under your tree. That's very thoughtful of you, Porter. If only he knew. I spent the rest of the day packing, not everything, just the important stuff. My clothes, my tools, my documents, and the few personal items that actually mattered to me. I loaded everything into my truck and drove to the Holiday Inn on Route 30. Not exactly luxury accommodations, but it would do while I figured out my next move. I called my lawyer, Jim Hendricks, who'd handled the paperwork when we bought our house. His secretary said he was out of town for the holidays, but she could schedule an appointment for the following week. I left a message saying I needed to discuss divorce proceedings and would call back after New Year's. Then I called my sister Casey. Porter, I thought you'd be at Mira's parents' house. Change of plans. Listen, I need to ask you a favor, and it's going to sound weird. Okay, shoot. If anyone asks where I am tomorrow, just say I'm taking some time to think. Don't give specifics. Casey was quiet for a moment. She was a nurse at Lancaster General Hospital, used to reading between the lines when people weren't telling her the whole truth. Porter, what's going on? I'll explain later. Just trust me on this one. All right, but you owe me a real explanation. Deal. I hung up and sat on the hotel bed, staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to call Mira, to tell her what was coming, to give her one last chance to choose our marriage over whatever fantasy she was chasing with Ty. But I'd already made my choice when I signed those papers. Instead, I turned off my phone and tried to get some sleep. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. Christmas morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of Pennsylvania winter weather that makes you want to stay inside. I imagined the scene at Harold and June's house. Mira probably woke up excited, thinking about her big reunion with Ty. Maybe she'd even dressed up special for the occasion. I had breakfast at the hotel restaurant and tried to read the newspaper, but I couldn't concentrate. My mind kept drifting to that white box under the Christmas tree, waiting for its moment. Around noon, my phone started buzzing. I'd turned it back on to check the time and immediately regretted it. 3 missed calls from Mira, 2 from her mother, 1 from Harold. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I drove to Nick Carver's house. Nick was my best friend, a mechanic who ran his own garage and had the kind of straightforward personality that cut through nonsense like a hot knife through butter. Porter, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be eating turkey and pretending to like your in-laws? That's a longer story than you might think. Got any beer? Nick's wife Emma was visiting her family in Ohio, so we had the place to ourselves. He grabbed 2 bottles from the refrigerator, and we sat in his living room while I explained the situation. So let me get this straight, Nick said when I finished. Your wife uninvited you from Christmas so she could hang out with her ex-boyfriend, and you responded by giving her divorce papers as a Christmas present? That's the basic idea. Nick was quiet for a minute, processing this information. Then he started laughing. Porter, that's either the most brilliant thing I've ever heard or the most insane, possibly both. I'm leaning toward insane myself. No, she had it coming. I've been watching Mira treat you like garbage for years, always complaining about your job, your truck, your friends, making you feel like you weren't good enough for her precious family. That was true. Mira had been chipping away at my self-confidence for years. Little comments about how I should be more ambitious, how I should dress better, how I should want more out of life. She never seemed to consider that maybe I was happy managing the hardware store, that maybe I didn't need to conquer the corporate world to feel successful. So what happens now? Nick asked. I have no idea. I suppose she opens the present, realizes her marriage is over, and we figure out how to divide 22 years of shared property. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text message from Casey. Whatever you did, Mira's parents are freaking out. June called me asking if I knew where you were. What's going on? I showed the message to Nick. Sounds like Christmas dinner is getting interesting, he said. We spent the afternoon watching football and avoiding my phone, which kept buzzing with increasingly frantic messages. I didn't read them. Whatever was happening at Harold and June's house, I'd find out soon enough. Around 6 o'clock, my phone rang. The caller ID said, Mira Mobile. I answered, Porter. Her voice was shaky, like she'd been crying. We need to talk. I figured we might. Where are you? Does it matter? Please, just come home. We can work this out. Can we? Because this morning you were more interested in talking to Ty than talking to your husband. Silence on the other end. Then, he came with someone else, Porter. He brought his fiancée. She's pregnant. I almost laughed. Almost. And how did that make you feel, Mira? Like an idiot. Good. That's a start. The papers? Are you serious about this? I've never been more serious about anything in my life. More silence. I could hear voices in the background. Probably her parents trying to figure out how their perfect Christmas had turned into a soap opera. I opened them in front of everyone, she said quietly. My parents, Ty, his fiancée, everyone saw. I know. That was cruel, Porter. Was it? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like honesty. You wanted me gone so you could pursue other options. I'm giving you exactly what you asked for. I never said I wanted a divorce. You didn't have to say it. Actions speak louder than words, Mira. You made your choice when you uninvited me from Christmas. I hung up before she could respond. Nick was watching me with a mixture of admiration and concern. You're really going through with this? Yeah, I am. Good for you, man. You deserve better than someone who treats you like a backup plan. My phone buzzed with another text, but I didn't look at it. Whatever Mira had to say could wait. I'd spent 22 years listening to her complaints and criticisms and demands for me to be someone I wasn't. Today was about me making choices for myself. The hotel room felt different when I got back that evening. Not lonely, exactly, but quiet in a way our house never was. No television blaring, no phone conversations with Lisa, no passive-aggressive comments about my appearance or my plans for the weekend. I ordered pizza and tried to think about what came next. The divorce would take months to finalize, assuming Mira didn't contest it. We'd have to divide our assets, sell the house probably, figure out how to untangle 2 decades of shared financial decisions. It should have felt overwhelming, but instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Relief. like I'd been holding my breath for so long I'd forgotten what normal breathing felt like. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from Casey. "I don't know what you did, but Harold Brennan called Dad asking if our family had put you up to this. Mom told him to mind his own business. Call me when you're ready to explain." I smiled and turned off the phone. Tomorrow I'd start dealing with the consequences of my Christmas gift. Tonight, I was going to enjoy the silence. The next morning brought 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. I scrolled through them while drinking coffee in the hotel restaurant, watching the drama unfold in real time through my phone screen. Mira had sent most of the texts, starting around midnight and continuing until 4 in the morning. The progression was fascinating to watch. Anger, then bargaining, then desperation, then back to anger. She'd apparently spent Christmas night awake, probably replaying the scene at her parents' house and trying to figure out how to fix what couldn't be fixed. Her parents had called 6 times. Casey called twice. Even my boss, Mr. Wallace, had left a voicemail saying he'd heard something happened and wanted to make sure I was okay. The most interesting message came from a number I didn't recognize. "Porter, this is Jessica Chen, Ty's fiancée. I think we should talk. Can you call me when you get this?" I stared at that message for a long time. What could Ty's pregnant fiancée possibly want to discuss with me? Maybe she was curious about the train wreck she'd witnessed yesterday. Or maybe she had her own questions about Ty's sudden interest in reconnecting with his ex-girlfriend. I decided to call her back. "Thank you for calling," Jessica said when she answered. Her voice was calm, professional. "I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I got your number from Mira's phone." "How did you get Mira's phone?" "She left it at the Brennan's house when she ran out. I may have looked through her contacts before Harold put it away." "Interesting. What did you want to talk about?" "Ty told me he was coming to Lancaster to network and attend some holiday parties. He never mentioned he'd be seeing his ex-girlfriend, or that she'd be uninviting her husband from Christmas to spend time with him." I could hear the anger underneath her controlled tone. That must have been an unpleasant surprise. "You could say that. Especially when she opened your gift." And I realized what had been going on. The whole room went silent, and I could see it in everyone's faces. They all knew something I didn't. "What did Ty say?" "Nothing useful. He kept insisting it was all innocent, that Mira had misunderstood his intentions. But the way she looked at him when we walked in, that wasn't misunderstanding. That was a woman expecting something that didn't happen." I found myself liking Jessica Chen. She was clearly smart enough to read the situation accurately, and she wasn't buying Ty's explanations any more than I was buying Mira's. "So what do you want from me?" I asked. "Information. How long has this been going on? What exactly has Mira told you about Ty?" I gave her the timeline. Ty's return to town 3 months ago. Mira's sudden interest in girls' nights and late work meetings. The phone calls that stopped when I entered the room. The gradual cooling of our marriage that I'd attributed to normal relationship drift, but now seemed more deliberate. "She's been planning this," Jessica said when I finished. "This wasn't some spontaneous reunion. She's been working up to it." "Sounds like it. What are you going to do?" "I'm not sure yet, but I wanted you to know that not everyone bought Ty's story yesterday. Your wife made a fool of herself, but she also exposed him as a liar." After we hung up, I sat in my truck in the hotel parking lot, trying to process this new information. Mira hadn't just been having an emotional affair, she'd been actively planning to leave me for Ty. The Christmas ultimatum wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, it was the culmination of months of scheming. That realization should have hurt more than it did. Instead, it just made me angrier. She'd been lying to my face for months, making me feel like I was imagining problems that didn't exist, while she plotted her exit strategy. My phone rang. "Casey." "Porter, what the hell is going on? Mom's been fielding phone calls all morning from the Brennans, and they're acting like you've lost your mind." "Maybe I have. Where are you?" "Home. Emma's still in Ohio and I'm working a double shift tonight. Come over, we need to talk. Casey lived in a small house near the hospital, close enough that she could walk to work when the weather was decent. I'd helped her renovate the kitchen 2 years ago, and she'd been trying to pay me back with home-cooked meals ever since. "You look terrible," she said when I arrived. "When's the last time you slept?" "I got a few hours. This whole thing is just insane." "Yeah, I figured that out from the phone calls. Sit down. I'll make coffee, and you can explain why Harold Brennan thinks our family has declared war on his daughter." I told her everything. The Christmas ultimatum, the divorce papers, the watch I'd returned, and my conversation with Jessica Chen. Casey listened without interrupting, her nurse training kicking in as she processed information and asked clarifying questions. "So Mira's been cheating on you," she said when I finished. "Emotionally, at least. I don't know if it's gotten physical. Does it matter? She uninvited you from Christmas to spend time with another man. That's enough." Casey had never particularly liked Mira, though she'd always been polite about it. She thought Mira was too demanding, too focused on status and appearances. But she'd never said anything directly critical until now. "The divorce papers were brilliant," she continued. "Cruel, maybe, but brilliant. She humiliated you in front of her family for months, treating you like you weren't good enough for their precious social circle. Turnabout is fair play." "Her parents are furious." "Of course they are. Their daughter got caught cheating on her husband in front of the whole family, including the man she was cheating with and his pregnant fiancée. They're probably more embarrassed than angry." My phone buzzed. Text from Mira. "Please come home. We need to talk about this like adults." I showed the message to Casey. "Are you going to respond?" "Eventually, but not today. Let her sit with this for a while. Let her think about what she's lost." "What about work? You're supposed to be back tomorrow." I'd forgotten about work. The hardware store was closed between Christmas and New Year's, but I had inventory to do and supplier orders to place. Normal life responsibilities that seemed surreal after the past 24 hours. "I'll go in tomorrow, keep busy, figure out my next move." Casey studied my face with the same intensity she probably used to evaluate patients in the emergency room. "You're handling this better than I expected." "Am I? Because I feel like I'm barely holding it together." "That's normal. Your entire life just changed in one day. But you're not falling apart, and you're not begging her to take you back. That's progress." She was right. The old Porter might have called Mira immediately, apologizing for the dramatic gesture and trying to work things out. This Porter was content to let her stew in the consequences of her choices. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Porter? This is Lisa Hartwell. I work with Mira." Lisa, Mira's partner in crime, the one who'd been encouraging her to do better than her small-town husband. This should be interesting. "What do you want, Lisa?" "I want to talk, face to face. Can you meet me somewhere?" "Why would I want to do that?" "Because there are things you don't know about this situation. Things that might change how you feel about everything." I almost laughed. "Lisa, I know exactly what kind of things you're talking about. You've been telling Mira she deserves better than me for months. You've been encouraging this whole thing with Ty. There's nothing you can tell me that's going to change my mind." "You're wrong. Meet me at Denny's on Route 30 in an hour. If you don't like what I have to say, you can leave." She hung up before I could respond. Casey was watching me with raised eyebrows. "Let me guess. One of Mira's friends wants to explain everything. Lisa Hartwell. She's been Mira's cheerleader through this whole thing. Are you going to meet her?" "I'm thinking about it. Might be interesting to hear what story they've cooked up." "Be careful. She's probably trying to manipulate you into taking Mira back." An hour later, I was sitting in a booth at Denny's, watching Lisa Hartwell fidget with her coffee cup and try to figure out how to start whatever conversation she'd planned. She was a thin woman in her early 40s, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested she lived on caffeine and anxiety. Thank you for coming, she said. I'm here. Start talking. Lisa looked around the restaurant like she was worried about being overheard, then leaned forward and lowered her voice. Mira didn't tell you the whole truth about Ty. I figured that out already. No, I mean, she didn't tell you why he really came back to Lancaster. I waited. He's in trouble, Porter. Financial trouble. His consulting business failed, and he owes money to some very serious people. He came back here because he was running away from his problems in California. This was not what I'd expected to hear. How do you know this? Because he told Mira. He's been using her, Porter. He never intended to leave his fiancée for her. He just needed someone to help him get back on his feet, and Mira was convenient. And you're telling me this because? Lisa's composure cracked slightly. Because I feel guilty. I encouraged her to pursue this thing with Ty because I thought you weren't good enough for her. I thought she deserved someone more exciting, more successful. But Ty's not successful. He's a fraud. So why not tell Mira this instead of me? I tried. She won't listen. She thinks I'm jealous because I'm single and she has 2 men fighting over her. She can't see that Ty is using her. I studied Lisa's face, trying to figure out if she was telling the truth or running some kind of elaborate con game. Her nervousness seemed genuine, but then again, she'd been helping Mira lie to me for months. What exactly do you want me to do with this information? I want you to consider giving her another chance. She made a mistake, Porter, a big one. But she's not evil, and she's not a cheater. She's just a woman who got manipulated by a smooth-talking con man. She uninvited me from Christmas, Lisa. She chose him over me. That's not manipulation, that's a choice. She was confused. She thought he was offering her something real. And what was I offering her? 22 years of marriage, a stable home, and a husband who loved her. Apparently that wasn't enough. Lisa was quiet for a moment, staring into her coffee. When she looked up, her eyes were watery. I know you hate me right now, and you have every right to. I gave her terrible advice because I was projecting my own issues onto your marriage. I'm 43 and single and bitter, and I wanted her to take risks I was too scared to take myself. At least you're honest about it. Will you think about what I said? About giving her another chance? I stood up and dropped a $5 bill on the table. I'll think about it. But Lisa, if you really feel guilty about this, maybe you should focus on being a better friend to Mira instead of trying to fix her marriage. She's going to need support when she figures out what Ty really is. I left her sitting in the booth and drove back to the hotel. The conversation had given me a lot to think about, but it hadn't changed my fundamental position. Even if Ty was a con man, even if Mira had been manipulated, she'd still made the choice to pursue him. She'd still uninvited me from Christmas. She'd still been willing to throw away our marriage for the possibility of something better. That evening, I finally called Mira back. Porter, thank God. Where are you? That's not important. We need to talk about how this is going to work. You mean the divorce? Porter, please, can't we at least discuss this? Can't you come home so we can talk face to face? I don't think that's a good idea right now. Why not? I'm your wife. Are you? Because yesterday you made it pretty clear that you'd rather be someone else's wife. Silence. Then, that's not fair. Isn't it? You uninvited me from Christmas so you could spend time with your ex-boyfriend. How exactly should I interpret that? It wasn't what you think. I just wanted closure. Closure? Right. How did that work out for you? More silence. I could hear her crying, which should have made me feel guilty but somehow didn't. She'd made her bed, now she could lie in it. He brought his fiancée, she said finally. I felt like such an idiot. I'm sorry you were embarrassed, but that doesn't change anything, Mira. You still chose him over me. The fact that he didn't choose you back doesn't make your decision any less hurtful. I want to fix this, Porter. I want to save our marriage. Do you? Or do you just want to avoid the consequences of your choices? She was crying harder now. Please don't do this. Please don't throw away 22 years over one mistake. One mistake? Mira, this has been building for months. The late nights, the phone calls, the way you've been treating me like I'm not good enough for you. This isn't one mistake. This is who you've become. That's not true, isn't it? When's the last time you said something nice about me? When's the last time you seemed happy to see me when I came home from work? When's the last time you acted like you actually wanted to be married to me instead of just tolerating it? She couldn't answer, which was answer enough. The papers are filed, Mira. I'll have my lawyer contact you next week to discuss the details. Until then, I think we should avoid contact. Porter, wait! I hung up. My phone immediately started buzzing with text messages, but I turned it off without reading them. I'd said what I needed to say. Now it was time to start figuring out how to build a life without her. The hardware store felt like a sanctuary when I returned to work the next morning. The familiar smell of sawdust and metal polish, the orderly rows of tools and supplies, the simple logic of matching problems with solutions. It all helped ground me in reality after the surreal drama of the past few days. Mr. Wallace was waiting for me when I unlocked the front door. Porter, how are you holding up? Tom Wallace had owned the store for 30 years before hiring me as manager 5 years ago. He was in his 70s now, mostly retired, but still came in a few mornings a week to check on things and chat with longtime customers. He'd been more of a father figure to me than my actual father, who'd passed away when I was in my 20s. I'm managing, I said. Sorry if any of this has reflected poorly on the store. Don't be ridiculous. What happens in your personal life is your business, but if you need time off to deal with lawyers or whatever, just let me know. Actually, I think staying busy is probably the best thing for me right now. We spent the morning doing inventory in the back room, counting bolts and screws and electrical components. The repetitive work was exactly what I needed, something to occupy my hands while my mind processed everything that had happened. Around noon, my phone rang. Jessica Chen again. I hope I'm not bothering you at work, she said. Not at all. What's going on? I had an interesting conversation with Ty last night about his business trip to Lancaster and his financial situation. And? He's broke, Porter. Completely broke. His consulting company folded 6 months ago, and he's been living off credit cards ever since. He came here because he was hoping Mira would help him get back on his feet financially. This matched what Lisa had told me at Denny's, but hearing it confirmed by Ty's own fiancée made it more real. How did you find this out? I confronted him about the Christmas dinner disaster, and he finally told me the truth. He's been lying to me about his financial situation for months. The engagement ring is fake. The apartment we're supposedly moving into together doesn't exist. Even the pregnancy announcement was part of his plan to keep me from asking too many questions. Wait, you're not actually pregnant? Oh, I'm pregnant, but I only told him about it 2 weeks ago, and his first reaction was panic, not joy. That should have been my first clue. I was starting to feel sorry for Jessica. She'd been manipulated just as much as Mira had, maybe more so. What are you going to do? I'm leaving him, today. I just wanted to let you know that your wife wasn't the only one who got played by Ty Morrison. He's a professional liar. I appreciate you telling me this, Jessica, but it doesn't really change anything between Mira and me. I know, she still chose to pursue him instead of working on her marriage, but I thought you should know what kind of man she was willing to throw away 22 years for. After we hung up, I sat in the store's back office, staring at the computer screen without really seeing it. The picture was becoming clearer now. Ty had returned to Lancaster specifically to reconnect with Mira, hoping to use their history to convince her to help him financially. Mira had been flattered by the attention and convinced herself it was true love. Lisa had encouraged the whole thing because of her own issues with men and marriage. It was almost funny, in a dark way. My wife had been willing to destroy our marriage for a man who was essentially a con artist. My phone buzzed with a text from Casey. Mom wants to know if you're coming to dinner Sunday. Also, Harold Brennan called Dad again. Apparently Mira's been calling around to all your relatives trying to find you. I texted back, "Tell Mom yes to dinner, and tell Dad he can give Harold my lawyer's number if he wants to communicate." The bell above the front door chimed, and I looked up to see Nick walking in. "How's the newly single life treating you?" he asked. "Still processing? What brings you by?" "Thought you might want to know that Ty Morrison's car is parked outside Brennan Insurance Company. Has been for about 2 hours." I looked at my watch. 2:30 in the afternoon. Mira would be at work. Interesting. I thought he'd left town after the Christmas disaster. Apparently not. Emma called me this morning from Ohio. Her cousin works at Brennan Insurance, and she says there's been drama all week. Mira's been crying at her desk, Lisa's been acting weird, and now Ty's showed up trying to fix things. Small towns. Everyone knew everyone else's business within hours of it happening. What do you think I should do with that information? Nothing. Let them sort out their own mess. But I thought you should know in case he tries to contact you. Nick was right. Whatever was happening between Mira and Ty wasn't my problem anymore. I'd filed for divorce, which meant my involvement in Mira's romantic drama was officially over. But I was still curious. Around 4 o'clock, my phone rang. Mira. "Porter, I need to tell you something." "I'm listening." "Ty came to see me today, at work. And? He wanted me to loan him money, a lot of money. He said he was having some temporary cash flow problems and needed help until his next consulting contract came through." "How much money?" $50,000. I almost dropped the phone. $50,000? Mira, we don't have $50,000 in liquid assets. "I know. That's what I told him. He suggested I could take out a loan against the house." "Our house. The house we own together." "Yes." "And what did you tell him?" "I told him I'd have to think about it." "Porter, I think I made a terrible mistake." "Which mistake are we talking about? Uninviting me from Christmas or considering taking out a loan for your ex-boyfriend?" "Both, all of it. I think Lisa was right about Ty. I think he's been using me." "Lisa told you that?" "She came to see me this morning. She said she'd talked to you, and that she felt guilty about encouraging this whole thing. She thinks Ty is a con man." So Lisa had decided to come clean. Interesting timing, right after Ty had revealed his true intentions by asking for money. "What do you want me to say, Mira? That I forgive you? That we can pretend none of this happened?" "I want you to come home so we can talk about this properly, face to face." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not? We're still married, Porter. We still own a house together. We still have 22 years of history together. Doesn't that count for something?" "It counted for something yesterday, when you uninvited me from Christmas. It counted for something last week, when you were planning your reunion with Ty. But apparently, it didn't count for enough." I was confused. I thought I wanted something different, something more exciting. But I was wrong. Were you? Or are you just disappointed that Ty turned out to be a fraud? Silence. "That's what I thought," I said. "You're not sorry you chose him over me, Mira. You're sorry he wasn't what you thought he was." "That's not fair." "Isn't it? If Ty had been everything you hoped for, if he'd been successful and available and ready to sweep you off your feet, would you be calling me right now? Or would you be filing for divorce yourself?" She couldn't answer, which was answer enough. "The papers are filed, Mira. My lawyer will be in touch next week. Until then, please don't contact me unless it's an emergency." I hung up and turned off my phone. Mr. Wallace emerged from the front of the store, where he'd been helping a customer with paint selection. "Everything all right back here?" Just my soon-to-be ex-wife discovering that her boyfriend isn't Prince Charming after all. Well, that's unfortunate for her, but probably good news for you in the long run." "How do you figure?" "Because now you know for certain that you made the right choice. If she'd realized her mistake before getting caught, you might have always wondered if you were too hasty. This way, you know she only wants you back, because her other option fell through." Tom Wallace was a wise man. That evening, I had dinner at a small restaurant near the hotel and tried to plan my next moves. I needed to find an apartment, something temporary while the divorce was finalized and we figured out what to do with the house. I needed to open my own bank account, separate from our joint finances. I needed to start thinking about what my life would look like as a single man in his 40s. It was overwhelming and terrifying and strangely exciting all at the same time. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Porter, this is Jessica Chen. Ty left town this afternoon. Thought you should know in case Mira tries to blame you for scaring him away. He left because I threatened to call his creditors in California and tell them where to find him." I texted back, "Thank you for the update. Are you okay?" "I will be. Better to find out what he really is now than after we were married." She was right about that. Another text, this one from Casey. "Mira called Mom tonight crying. Mom told her she made her own bed and now she has to lie in it. I'm proud of our family for not falling for the guilt trip." That made me smile. My family had always been straightforward about relationships and personal responsibility. They'd welcomed Mira when we got married, but they weren't going to enable her bad choices just because she was family. I spent the rest of the evening looking at apartment listings online and trying to imagine what my new life might look like. It was strange to think about decorating a space that would be entirely mine, buying furniture that reflected my tastes instead of compromising with someone else's preferences. For the first time since Christmas morning, I felt something that might have been optimism. The next morning brought a phone call from Jim Hendricks, my lawyer. "Porter, I got your message. I'm back in town and I've reviewed the paperwork you filed. Everything looks correct, but I want to discuss strategy before we proceed." "What kind of strategy?" "Well, for starters, has Mira indicated whether she plans to contest the divorce?" "She wants to reconcile, but I think that's more about avoiding embarrassment than actually wanting to save the marriage." "Understood. What about assets? Do you have a clear picture of your joint finances?" "Pretty clear. We own the house jointly. We have about $30,000 in savings, retirement accounts, the usual stuff. Nothing too complicated." "Good. And are there any issues I should know about? Infidelity, substance abuse, anything that might complicate proceedings?" I told him about Mira's emotional affair with Ty, the Christmas ultimatum, and Ty's request for money. Jim took notes and asked clarifying questions. "This actually strengthens your position," he said when I finished. "Her willingness to prioritize another man over her marriage, combined with her consideration of risking marital assets to help him financially, demonstrates a pattern of behavior that works in your favor." "What does that mean practically?" "It means if she contests the divorce or tries to claim a larger share of assets, we have documentation of her choices that led to the breakdown of the marriage. Most judges don't look favorably on spouses who jeopardize family finances for extramarital relationships." "I'm not trying to destroy her financially, Jim. I just want out of the marriage cleanly." "I understand, but it's good to have leverage in case she decides to make things difficult." We scheduled a meeting for the following week to go over the details and plan our approach. Jim warned me that even uncontested divorces could take several months to finalize, but he was optimistic that we could reach a settlement without too much drama. After we hung up, I felt more confident about my decision. I had good legal representation, a clear understanding of our financial situation, and documentation of the events that led to the divorce. Most importantly, I had the moral clarity that came from knowing I'd tried to save the marriage and been rejected. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Porter, this is Harold Brennan, Mira's father. This should be interesting." "Hello, Harold. I think we need to talk, man to man." "About what?" "About this divorce nonsense, about giving my daughter a second chance, about not throwing away 22 years over a misunderstanding." "I don't think there was any misunderstanding, Harold. Mira made her position pretty clear when she uninvited me from Christmas. She made a mistake. People make mistakes, Porter. That doesn't mean you have to destroy a marriage over it." I didn't destroy the marriage, Harold. Mira did that when she chose another man over her husband. She was confused. That Morrison fellow filled her head with romantic nonsense, and she got carried away. But he's gone now, and she realizes what she's lost. Does she? Or does she just realize that her backup plan didn't work out? Harold was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his tone was more serious. Porter, I know June and I haven't always been as supportive of you as we should have been. We thought Mira could do better, marry someone with more education or a more prestigious career. We were wrong about that. Were you? Yes. You're a good man, and you've been a good husband to our daughter. You deserve better than what she put you through. That was probably the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get from Harold Brennan. I appreciate you saying that. But I'm asking you to consider giving her another chance. For the sake of your marriage, for the sake of our family, she's learned her lesson. Has she? Because yesterday she was still considering loaning Ty Morrison $50,000 of our money. That doesn't sound like someone who's learned anything. She told you about that? She did. Harold, your daughter was willing to risk our financial security to help a man she'd known for 3 months. That's not a mistake. That's a fundamental difference in values. Harold sighed. What would it take, Porter? What would she have to do to earn your forgiveness? I don't think there's anything she could do. The trust is gone, Harold. Once that's broken, you can't just glue it back together and pretend it never happened. So that's it? You're just giving up? I'm not giving up. I'm accepting reality. Mira doesn't want to be married to me. She wants to be married to the idea of me as a safety net in case her other plans don't work out. That's not a marriage. That's a business arrangement. She loves you, Porter. Maybe she does, but she doesn't respect me, and she doesn't choose me when it matters. Love without respect and commitment isn't enough. We talked for a few more minutes, but Harold eventually accepted that I wasn't going to change my mind. He asked me to consider mediation instead of a contentious divorce, and I agreed that was probably the best approach for everyone involved. After we hung up, I sat in my truck outside the hardware store and thought about the conversation. Part of me felt bad for Harold and June. They were watching their daughter's marriage collapse in spectacular fashion, and they were probably embarrassed by the whole situation. But they'd also spent 22 years treating me like I wasn't good enough for their daughter. It was hard to feel too sorry for them now that their daughter had proven she agreed with their assessment. My phone buzzed with a text from Nick. Want to grab dinner tonight? Emma's back from Ohio and she wants to hear the whole story. I texted back, sure, but warn her it's a long story. She's got time. And wine. That evening, I found myself sitting in Nick and Emma's living room, drinking wine and telling the story of my Christmas divorce for what felt like the 100th time. Emma listened with the fascination of someone watching a particularly dramatic television show. So let me get this straight, she said when I finished. Your wife uninvited you from Christmas to spend time with her ex-boyfriend, who turned out to be a broke con man who was only interested in her money, and now she wants you back because her plan didn't work out? That's the basic summary, yes. And you gave her divorce papers as a Christmas present? I did. Emma looked at Nick. I like him better now than I did before. Thanks, I think. No, seriously. I always thought you were too nice, too willing to let Mira walk all over you. This shows you have some backbone. I'm still figuring out what I have, to be honest. You have self-respect, Emma said. That's more than a lot of people can say. We talked until late into the evening, and for the first time since Christmas morning, I felt like myself again. Not Mira's disappointing husband, not Harold and June's inadequate son-in-law, just Porter Kellor, a man who'd made a difficult decision and was learning to live with the consequences. It felt good. 3 weeks into January, I'd settled into a routine that felt surprisingly normal. I'd found a small apartment above the bakery on Main Street, close enough to walk to work when the weather was decent. The place was furnished, which meant I didn't have to worry about buying furniture until the divorce was finalized, and I knew what my financial situation would look like. Mira had stopped calling me directly, but she'd been reaching out through intermediaries. Her parents, my sister, even Mr. Wallace had received visits from her, all asking them to convince me to reconsider. The message was always the same. She'd made a mistake, she was sorry, she wanted to work things out. What she never said, according to the people who talked to her, was that she understood why I'd left. She never acknowledged that her behavior had been wrong, only that the consequences had been worse than she'd expected. My lawyer, Jim Hendricks, had been in contact with Mira's attorney about the divorce proceedings. She was contesting some of the asset division, claiming that my abandonment of the marriage entitled her to a larger share of our joint property. Jim wasn't worried about it, but it meant the process would take longer than we'd originally hoped. "She's stalling," he told me during our meeting that Thursday morning. "Her lawyer thinks if they drag this out long enough, you'll get tired of the expense and the hassle and agree to reconcile. That's not going to happen. I know that, and you know that, but they're hoping you'll change your mind. It's a common strategy in cases like this." "Cases like what?" "Cases where one spouse realizes they made a mistake and tries to use the legal system to force a reconciliation." "Can they do that?" "Not really. Pennsylvania is a no-fault divorce state, which means we don't have to prove wrongdoing to get the divorce granted. But they can make the process expensive and time-consuming, hoping you'll give up." "I'm not giving up." "Good, because I think we're about to see an escalation in their tactics." Jim was right. That afternoon, I came home from work to find Mira sitting on the steps outside my apartment building. "We need to talk," she said when she saw me. "I thought we'd covered everything we needed to cover." "Apparently not, since you're still going through with this divorce." She looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she was wearing jeans and a sweatshirt instead of her normal business attire. She'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well. "Mira, what are you doing here?" "I'm trying to save my marriage, our marriage." "There's nothing to save. We've been over this." "Have we?" "Because I don't think you've really listened to what I've been trying to tell you." "Which is what?" "That I made a mistake. That I was confused and stupid, and I let someone else manipulate me into thinking I wanted something I didn't actually want." "And what do you want?" "I want my husband back. I want my life back. I want to fix what I broke." "You can't fix this, Mira. You can't take back uninviting me from Christmas. You can't take back months of treating me like I wasn't good enough for you. You can't take back being willing to risk our financial security for another man. I know I can't take it back, but I can learn from it. I can be better." "Can you?" "Because 3 weeks ago you were still defending your decision to pursue Ty. You were still acting like I was overreacting to a minor indiscretion. That was before I understood what he really was." "So you're only sorry because it didn't work out the way you planned?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ground. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. "Maybe, at first. But Porter, I've had 3 weeks to think about what I lost, and it's not about Ty anymore. It's about you. It's about us." "What about us?" "I took you for granted. I spent so many years focusing on what I thought was wrong with our life that I forgot to appreciate what was right with it." "Such as?" "Such as the fact that you loved me unconditionally for 22 years. Such as the fact that you supported my career even when it meant you had to work longer hours to make up for my schedule. Such as the fact that you never once made me feel bad about my family's money or their attitude toward you." "But you did make me feel bad about your family's attitude toward me." "I know. I was embarrassed by their snobbery, but instead of defending you, I took it out on you. I made you feel like you needed to be someone different to deserve me. And now? Now I know that I was the one who didn't deserve you." It was a pretty speech, and it might have been sincere, but it was also 3 weeks too late. "Mira, even if I believed that you really understand what went wrong, even if I believed you were genuinely sorry, I still wouldn't take you back." Why not? Because I don't trust you anymore. Because I spent 3 months watching you pull away from me, lie to me, and plan your exit strategy, and I can't forget that. Because when you had to choose between me and someone else, you chose someone else. But I was wrong. I chose wrong. Yes, you did, and that choice tells me everything I need to know about how you really feel about our marriage. People make mistakes, Porter. People change their minds. People learn from their errors and become better. Some people do, but some people just get better at hiding what they really want until the next opportunity comes along. You think I'd do this again? I think you'd do whatever felt right to you in the moment, just like you did with Ty. I think you'd rationalize it the same way you rationalized everything else. That's not fair, isn't it? You spent months lying to me about your feelings for another man. You uninvited me from Christmas so you could pursue him. You considered risking our financial security to help him. And through all of that, you convinced yourself that you were the victim of circumstances beyond your control. I never said I was a victim. You didn't have to say it. You acted like it. Like your feelings for Ty were something that just happened to you, instead of something you chose to cultivate. She was crying now, but I felt oddly detached from her tears. 3 weeks ago, seeing her cry would have made me want to comfort her. Now it just made me tired. What do you want me to say, Mira? That I forgive you? Fine, I forgive you. That I understand why you did what you did? I understand that too. But forgiveness and understanding don't mean I have to stay married to you. They could, though, if you wanted them to. But I don't want them to. I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering when you're going to decide I'm not enough again. I don't want to spend the rest of my life trying to prove I'm worthy of your loyalty. You wouldn't have to do that, wouldn't I? Because that's exactly what I've been doing for the past few years, and it wasn't working. She stood up, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. So that's it? You're just going to throw away 22 years? I'm not throwing anything away. I'm accepting that those 22 years are over. We had some good times, Mira. We built a life together. But that life is finished now, and we both need to move on. I don't want to move on. I know. But what you want isn't the only thing that matters anymore. She walked to her car without saying goodbye. I watched her drive away and felt something that might have been sadness, but also something that was definitely relief. My phone rang 20 minutes later. Casey. Mira just called Mom, crying her eyes out. She said you were cruel to her. Was I? I don't know. What did you tell her? I recounted the conversation as accurately as I could remember it. Casey listened without interrupting. You weren't cruel, she said when I finished. You were honest. There's a difference. She seems to think I should forgive and forget? Of course she does. That would be convenient for her. Am I being too harsh? Too unforgiving? Porter. She uninvited you from Christmas to spend time with another man. If someone did that to me, I'd probably set their car on fire. That's illegal. So is adultery in some states. My point is, you're handling this with a lot more grace than most people would. It doesn't feel graceful. Grace isn't about how you feel. It's about how you act, despite how you feel. That evening, I had dinner at the diner down the street from my apartment and tried to process the conversation with Mira. Part of me wondered if I was being too stubborn, too unwilling to consider the possibility that people could change and relationships could be repaired. But the larger part of me knew that some things, once broken, couldn't be fixed. Trust was like a piece of fine china. You could glue it back together, but it would never be as strong as it was before, and the cracks would always be visible. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica Chen. How are you holding up? I heard through the grapevine that Mira's been trying to reconcile. I texted back. She came to see me today. I told her it wasn't going to happen. Good for you. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. How are you doing? Better. I moved back to Philadelphia last week, starting fresh. And the baby? Due in July. I'm scared but also excited. It'll be good to have something positive to focus on. If you ever need anything, let me know. Thanks. Same to you. I finished dinner and walked back to my apartment, thinking about Jessica and her decision to start over as a single mother. It took courage to leave a bad situation and build something new, even when the future was uncertain. Maybe that's what I was doing too. The next morning brought a phone call from Jim Hendricks. Porter, we need to talk. Mira's lawyer called yesterday with a new proposal. What kind of proposal? They want to try mediation before proceeding with the divorce. They're claiming that you haven't given the marriage a fair chance to be repaired. We've been separated for a month. How much more chance does it need? That's what I told them. But they're insisting that mediation is required before they'll agree to an uncontested divorce. And if I refuse? Then we go to court, which will be more expensive and take longer. How much longer? Could be 6 months or more, depending on the court's schedule. I thought about it. 6 months of legal battles, depositions, and court appearances. 6 months of Mira and her lawyers trying to prove that I was being unreasonable. 6 months of having my personal life dissected by strangers. What would mediation involve? We'd meet with a neutral third party who would try to help us reach an agreement on the divorce terms. It's usually faster and cheaper than going to court. But they're hoping the mediator will convince me to reconcile. Probably. But mediators can't force reconciliation. Their job is to help resolve disputes, not save marriages. Set it up. Let's get this over with. Are you sure? You don't have to agree to this. I'm sure. The sooner we resolve this, the sooner I can move on with my life. The mediation was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, I tried to prepare myself for what would probably be an emotional and difficult process. Mira would likely use the opportunity to make one final plea for reconciliation, and I needed to be ready to stand firm without being unnecessarily harsh. The night before the mediation, Nick came by my apartment with a bottle of whiskey and a deck of cards. Thought you might want some distraction, he said. Thanks. I could use it. We played poker and drank whiskey and talked about everything except my marriage. It was exactly what I needed, a reminder that life existed outside the drama of divorce proceedings. You nervous about tomorrow? Nick asked around midnight. A little. I know what I want to say, but I'm worried about how I'll react when she starts crying and begging me to come home. Just remember why you left. Remember how you felt when she uninvited you from Christmas. I remember. Good. Because that feeling was real, and it was justified, and it's not going to go away just because she's sorry now. The mediation took place in a conference room at Jim's law office. The mediator was a woman named Dr. Sarah Patterson, a psychologist who specialized in family disputes. She was in her 50s, with gray hair and a calm demeanor that suggested she'd seen every kind of marital drama imaginable. Mira arrived with her lawyer, a young man named David Chen, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She was dressed professionally again, back to her usual polished appearance, but I could see the tension in her shoulders and the careful way she avoided making eye contact with me. Dr. Patterson started by explaining the process and setting ground rules. Everyone would have a chance to speak without interruption. The goal was to reach an agreement that both parties could live with. Personal attacks and emotional manipulation were discouraged. Porter, would you like to start by explaining your position? Dr. Patterson asked. I'd rehearsed this speech in my head dozens of times, but actually saying it out loud was harder than I'd expected. I filed for divorce because my wife chose another man over our marriage. She uninvited me from Christmas so she could spend time with her ex-boyfriend. She was willing to risk our financial security to help him with his problems. She spent months lying to me about her feelings and her intentions. The trust that held our marriage together is gone, and I don't believe it can be repaired. Mira, how do you respond to that? Mira took a deep breath before speaking. I made terrible mistakes. I was confused and selfish, and I hurt the man I love. But people can change, and marriages can be healed if both people are willing to work at it. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to repair the damage I've done. What specifically are you willing to do? Dr. Patterson asked. Counseling, individual therapy, and couples therapy. Complete transparency about my communications and activities. Whatever Porter needs to feel secure in our relationship again. Porter, does that change your position? No, because the fundamental problem isn't that Mira made mistakes. The fundamental problem is that when she had to choose between me and someone else, she chose someone else. That tells me everything I need to know about her priorities. But people's priorities can change, Mira interjected. I know what I want now. I want my marriage. You want your marriage because your other option didn't work out. If Ty had been everything you hoped for, we wouldn't be having this conversation. That's not true, isn't it? You were willing to throw away 22 years for a man you'd reconnected with 3 months earlier. That's not a momentary lapse in judgment. That's a fundamental misunderstanding of what marriage means. Dr. Patterson held up a hand to stop the argument before it escalated. Let's focus on practical matters. Porter, what would it take for you to consider reconciliation? Nothing. There's nothing she could do or say that would make me trust her again. That seems like a very absolute position. It is, because some things can't be undone. Some choices reveal character in ways that can't be taken back. Mira, how do you respond to that? I think Porter is hurt and angry, and he has every right to be. But I also think he's not giving us a chance to rebuild what we had. We can't rebuild what we had because what we had was based on the assumption that we were both committed to the marriage above all else. You've proven that assumption was wrong. I've proven that I'm human and I make mistakes. No, you've proven that your commitment to our marriage was conditional, that when something better came along, you were willing to abandon everything we'd built together. The mediation continued for 3 hours, but the fundamental positions never changed. Mira wanted reconciliation and was willing to do whatever it took to achieve it. I wanted divorce and believed that reconciliation was impossible given what had happened. Dr. Patterson tried various approaches, focusing on shared history, discussing the practical benefits of staying married, exploring the possibility of a trial separation instead of divorce. Nothing worked. Finally, she called a break and asked to speak with each of us privately. Porter, she said when we were alone, I want to make sure you fully considered the implications of your decision. Divorce is permanent. Once it's finalized, you can't change your mind and go back to being married to Mira. I understand that. Do you? Because in my experience, people sometimes make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. This isn't a temporary emotion. This is a rational response to a fundamental betrayal of trust. Mira seems genuinely remorseful. I'm sure she is, but remorse doesn't undo the damage that's been done. What if she hadn't uninvited you from Christmas? What if she'd ended things with Ty before they went too far? Would you be willing to work on the marriage then? Maybe, but that's not what happened. I'm trying to understand where your line is. What specific action made reconciliation impossible? The moment she told me not to come to Christmas because her ex-boyfriend would be there. That was the moment she chose him over me, and that's the moment our marriage ended. Dr. Patterson nodded. I understand, and I want you to know that your position is reasonable, given what happened. Some betrayals are too fundamental to overcome. When the mediation resumed, Dr. Patterson announced that reconciliation wasn't possible, and we should focus on the terms of the divorce. It took another hour to work out the details, but we eventually reached an agreement that both sides could accept. Mira would keep the house and most of the furniture in exchange for taking over the mortgage payments. I would keep my retirement accounts and half of our savings. We'd split the proceeds from selling her car and some other shared assets. It was fair, practical, and final. As we signed the paperwork, Mira looked at me one last time. "I want you to know that I'll regret this for the rest of my life," she said. "I know, but regret doesn't change anything." "It could, if you let it." "I can't let it. I'm sorry, Mira, but this is how it has to be." She nodded and walked out of the conference room without saying goodbye. Jim shook my hand. "It's over, Porter. The paperwork will be filed this week, and the divorce should be finalized within 60 days. "Thank you. Are you okay?" "I think so. It's strange, but I feel relieved." "That's normal. You've been in limbo for weeks. Now you can start planning your future." I walked out of the law office into the bright February sunshine and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Freedom. Not just freedom from my marriage to Mira, but freedom from the constant stress of trying to save something that couldn't be saved. My phone buzzed with a text from Casey. "How did it go?" I texted back, "It's over. Divorce will be final in 60 days. How do you feel?" "Like I can breathe again." "Good. Come to dinner Sunday. We're celebrating your new life." I smiled and put my phone away. For the first time in weeks, I was looking forward to Sunday dinner. That evening, I sat in my small apartment and thought about what came next. I was 41 years old, newly single with a stable job and a fresh start ahead of me. It was scary and exciting and full of possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to consider while I was still married. I thought about Mira, probably sitting in our old house, surrounded by furniture and memories of a life that no longer existed. I felt sorry for her, but I didn't regret my decision. Some mistakes have consequences that can't be undone, and some choices reveal truths that can't be ignored. She'd chosen Ty over me when she thought he was her ticket to a better life. The fact that he'd turned out to be a fraud didn't change the fundamental reality of that choice. I'd chosen self-respect over reconciliation, and I was prepared to live with that decision for the rest of my life. My phone rang. Nick. "How did it go?" "It's done. 60 days and I'm officially a free man." "Congratulations. Emma's making steaks tomorrow night to celebrate. You're invited." "Thanks, I'll be there." "Porter?" "Yeah? You did the right thing." "I hope so." "I know so. You're going to be fine." He was right. I was going to be fine. Different than I'd been before, but fine. I opened a beer and sat by the window, watching the people walk by on Main Street. Couples holding hands, families with children, single people heading home from work or out for the evening. All of them living their lives, making choices, dealing with consequences. Tomorrow I would go back to work at the hardware store. I would help customers solve problems, manage inventory, and continue building the business that had become more than just a job to me. I would have dinner with friends who cared about me. I would start thinking about what I wanted my new life to look like. But tonight, I was content to sit in my small apartment and appreciate the simple fact that I was exactly where I chose to be, with exactly the life I'd decided to build. It wasn't the life I'd planned when I married Mira 23 years ago, but it was honest, and it was mine. That was enough. The divorce was finalized on March 15th, a cold Tuesday morning that felt more like winter than spring. I signed the final papers in Jim's office, officially ending 22 years of marriage with the stroke of a pen. "How does it feel?" Jim asked. "Anticlimactic," I said. I thought it would feel more significant somehow. "The significant part happened weeks ago when you made the decision. This is just paperwork." He was right. The real ending had been that Christmas morning when I chose to return the watch and pack divorce papers instead. Everything since then had just been the legal process catching up with the emotional reality. I drove back to the hardware store and tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting to the strange milestone I'd just passed. I was officially single for the first time in over 2 decades. Divorced. A word that had seemed impossible when applied to my own life just a few months earlier. Mr. Wallace found me staring at a display of paint cans around noon. "You okay, Porter?" "Just got the final divorce papers signed." "Ah, how do you feel?" Honestly? Like I should feel something more than I do. What do you feel? Relieved, ready to move forward. Maybe a little sad about what we used to have, but not sad about letting it go. That sounds healthy to me. Does it? Because I keep thinking I should be more upset about the end of my marriage. Porter, you've been mourning this marriage for months. You did your grieving while you were still trying to save it. By the time you filed for divorce, you'd already accepted that it was over. I suppose that's true. The question now is what you want to do with your freedom. I have no idea. Well, you've got time to figure it out. That evening, I had dinner at Casey's house with her and her boyfriend Mark, a teacher at the local high school who'd been patiently waiting for Casey to decide she was ready for a serious relationship. So what's the plan now? Casey asked over dessert. I don't have a plan. Is that weird? Not at all, Mark said. I was single for 5 years after my first marriage ended. Took me 3 of those years just to figure out who I was when I wasn't trying to be someone's husband. How long were you married? 8 years, but it felt like 20 by the end. Any advice? Don't rush into anything. Take time to rediscover what you actually like, what you actually want. Don't just look for someone to fill the space Mira left. I'm not looking for anyone right now. Good, because the best relationships happen when you're not looking for them. Casey smiled. Mark speaking from experience, I certainly wasn't looking for a boyfriend when we met. How did you meet? Parent-teacher conference, Mark said. Casey was there with her friend's kid, and I thought she was the mom. Spent 20 minutes trying to figure out why this woman didn't seem to know anything about her own child's academic performance. It was mortifying, Casey laughed, but also kind of charming. I watched them together, the easy way they teased each other, the obvious affection in their interactions. It was what a healthy relationship looked like, 2 people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company and brought out the best in each other. It was nothing like what Mira and I had become in the final years of our marriage. Do you miss it? I asked Mark. Being married, I mean. I miss some things about it. Having someone to share the daily stuff with. Having a built-in companion for social events. But I don't miss the constant tension, the feeling like I was walking on eggshells all the time. That sounds familiar. The thing is, Porter, a good relationship should make your life better, not harder. If you're constantly trying to avoid conflict or prove your worth to your partner, something's wrong. I spent the last few years of my marriage feeling like I was failing some test I didn't understand. Exactly. And that's not love. That's not even like. That's just 2 people who've gotten stuck in a destructive pattern. Driving home that night, I thought about Mark's words. A good relationship should make your life better, not harder. It seemed so obvious when he said it, but I'd lost sight of that truth somewhere along the way. I'd been so focused on trying to save my marriage that I'd forgotten to ask whether it was worth saving. I'd been so committed to the idea of being married that I'd ignored the reality of what my marriage had become. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Porter, this is Jessica Chen. I heard your divorce was finalized today. Congratulations on your freedom. I texted back, Thanks, how are you doing? Good, great actually. I'm 20 weeks along now and everything looks healthy. I'm excited. That's wonderful. Any regrets about leaving Ty? None. Best decision I ever made. Turns out I'm much happier building a life for myself and my baby than I ever was trying to build one with someone who didn't really want to be there. That's a good lesson. It is. And Porter, I know we don't really know each other, but I'm proud of you for choosing yourself over a marriage that wasn't working. It takes courage to start over. Thanks. That means a lot. Take care of yourself. I smiled and put my phone away. Jessica was right. It did take courage to start over, but it also took courage to stay in a bad situation, hoping things would get better. I'd spent years being the wrong kind of brave. Now I was learning to be the right kind. The next few weeks passed quietly. I settled into my new routine as a divorced man, which turned out to be remarkably similar to my old routine as a married man, except without the constant underlying tension. I worked at the hardware store, had dinner with friends, read books I'd been meaning to read for years, and slowly started making plans for the future. I was thinking about taking some business classes, maybe eventually buying the store from Mr. Wallace when he was ready to retire completely. I heard through the small-town grapevine that Mira had put our old house on the market and was planning to move closer to her parents. Lisa Hartwell had apparently been transferred to the company's Philadelphia office, which meant Mira was losing both her marriage and her closest friend in the span of a few months. I felt sorry for her, but I didn't feel guilty about my role in her situation. She'd made her choices, just as I'd made mine. One evening in early April, I was having dinner at the diner when someone slid into the booth across from me. I looked up to see a woman about my age with brown hair and kind eyes. "You're Porter Kellor, right?" she said. "Yes. Do we know each other?" "Not really. I'm Susan Mitchell. I work at the library. I've seen you around town, and I heard about your divorce." "Okay. I hope you don't mind me approaching you like this. It's just that I went through a divorce myself about 2 years ago, and I remember how isolating it could feel. It's been an adjustment. I'm sure. I just wanted you to know that there's a support group that meets at the community center on Thursday nights. People who've been through divorce, just talking about the experience and supporting each other. That's thoughtful of you, but I'm doing okay. I'm sure you are. But if you ever want to talk to people who understand what you're going through, we're there. No pressure, no agenda. Just people who've been where you are." She handed me a small card with meeting information and stood to leave. "Susan?" "Yes?" "Thank you for thinking of me. We look out for each other in this town. That's what makes it home." After she left, I sat in the diner thinking about her words. We look out for each other in this town. It was true. Over the past few months, I'd been surrounded by people who cared about my well-being. My family, my friends, my boss, even relative strangers like Susan who took the time to offer support. I'd been so focused on what I'd lost in the divorce that I'd forgotten to appreciate what I still had. A community that valued me, work that gave me purpose, relationships that were based on genuine affection rather than obligation. Maybe starting over wasn't about replacing what I'd lost. Maybe it was about building on what had always been there. I finished my dinner and walked home through the quiet streets of the town I'd lived in my entire life. For the first time since Christmas morning, I felt genuinely optimistic about the future. Not because I had specific plans or expectations, but because I finally understood that I had the freedom to create whatever life I wanted. The freedom to choose relationships that made me happy, work that fulfilled me, and experiences that enriched my life. The freedom to be myself without apology or compromise. It had taken the end of my marriage to teach me that lesson, but it was a lesson worth learning. As I unlocked the door to my apartment, my phone buzzed with a text from Nick. "Beer and poker tomorrow night? Emma's working late." I texted back, "Absolutely." Some things, I thought, never changed, and that was perfectly fine with me.